Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan, Spencer Dinwiddie, Wilson Chandler,
Yeah.
Taurean Prince. Those
Prince,
6 guys not in Orlando. Then, because they have a back-to-back on Wednesday with the Celtics, they opted to rest Jared Allen, first missed game of the year for J.A., Joe Harris, Caris LeVert.
That's
They
insane.
came into today's game with 11 available players, only 4 of which were on the opening night roster. Garrett Temple, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, Jean Musa, Rodion Kurucs. And they went in and they beat the Bucks.
That's where, like, at the end of the day, I get it. Bucks Twitter, do not come at us right now because honestly, that's a bad loss. You know, it's great for the Nets. It is absolutely great. But if you're the 1 seed and the team that you're playing is down its top 9 players in a league that usually only has 15 guys on a roster, you should wipe the floor with them. And credit to the Nets because they played great. And I want to give you a second, Jason, because, you know, there was a guest who came on who's going to have to defend himself in the near future who predicted an 0-8 spell in Orlando. And I think we can safely say that's not going to come to pass, Jason.
No, absolutely not. And I was a little nervous watching the Wizards game on Sunday because that would have increased the chances of a potential play-in series had the Wizards won. But it was a great effort all around from the top 3 guys, Joe Harris, Caris LeVert with 34 points. Jared Allen has been a double-double machine and showing that he does deserve to be a starter, okay? Even though DeAndre Jordan's got the mantle, the respect, the gold medal, the all-star berth, Jared Allen will be a force to be reckoned with in this league for a long time. But to me, I credit Jacque Vaughn and the coaching staff because they let their top 3 guys carry the load and get a much-needed win on Sunday. And then coming into a game where those top 3 guys were out, nursing minor injuries and or load management, rest, they were 19-point underdogs, Ben. 19. Vaughn coached his tail off. Luwawu-Cabarrot, career-high 26. Garrett Temple, game-winning pull-up jumper from the elbow. Chris Chiozza, first double-double of his career, 10 points, 10 assists. Rodion Kurucs, great as a stretch 5. Dante Hall, getting into a tizzy or skirmish. What sounds better, Ben? Tizzy or skirmish?
A brouhaha.
A brouhaha with the reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis was not happy at all. I mean, this was a very spirited win for the Brooklyn Nets. This was insane, okay? This was the 3rd biggest point spread upset since 1990. This is according to ESPN, behind the Orlando Magic, who were plus 21 at the Bulls in 92. Sorry, Ben. And the Mavericks, plus 19.5 at Seattle, the Supersonics. Wow, throwback in 1993. So it's been 27 years since an underdog won. 19-point spread. I was befuddled when I saw that spread. I'm thinking, you know, maybe they'll lose by 10, 12 points. No, they came out and they played great basketball. The zone defense, the 2-2-1, you know, it did give up some offensive rebounds, some second chance opportunities, but for the most part, the defense was crisp. And the key to beating the Bucks, if you're listening, the other 21 teams in the bubble, do what the Nets and Rockets just did. Shoot threes. They cannot defend threes at a high clip, and that showed in both of these games. But kudos to the Nets. I'm not saying the Nets are going to make any noise or anything, but this was a huge win for the organization. You have all those guys who are out watching. Jamal Crawford becoming just the 8th player to enter a game in his 20th season. Look good. Hopefully the hamstring injury is not won't keep him out too long. Had a quick 5 points, couple of assists, looked the part. So
Absolutely.
You're the organization, you have to be thrilled with the effort against the Bucks.
I think, though, on the other side here, Jason, is you mentioned the word befuddling. What's befuddling to me is the fact that Coach Budenholzer basically watched the Rockets shred their defense with corner threes that were easily gotten a year after being knocked out of the playoffs by a team that eviscerated them with pull-up threes, being the Toronto Raptors. And a game after that happens, he still hasn't adjusted his scheme. And this just, I think the alarm bell is ringing a little bit here for me. I mean, not really for me because I haven't really been all that high on the Bucks this year. I thought they'd be a really good regular season team. And then I was worried about them in the playoffs, which is exactly how I feel now. I'm not sure he's ready to make the adjustments he needs to. And it makes me wonder, Jason, is the Eastern Conference a little bit more open than it looked a week ago.
It didn't have to be. Do you realize that the Bucks winning against the Nets would have wrapped up sole possession, number one seed? Not that seeding really matters, I guess, anymore, unless it's based on the opponents, because home court is out the window. It's cute what the league's doing with the virtual fans and things of that nature, trying to make it feel like a real game in someone's arena. The fact is it's not. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, so the East did not have to be wide open, but the Bucks have a lot to figure out. This was their first game with a full complement of players. Brook Lopez sat for rest. He would have destroyed the Nets had he been there. Robin Lopez, his twin, did not have a great game, fouled out. But for the most part, they had their full complement of players. I mean, Giannis, Chris Middleton, those guys played the first half, their normal minutes. If you're Coach Bud, I'm going to ask you this, man. Why not play them in the second half? The Nets went in with an 8-point lead. Had Giannis played, I think it would have been a complete different result. But he just said, look, we'll play for another day. We don't have to get the number one seed. We'll get it in another day. I mean, I get it. Load management is big in this bubble, considering the long layoff. But what was up with Coach Budenholzer's decision to not play his stars in the second half?
I can't tell you, but it just, the whole thing worries me a little bit. And it's just making me wonder who the team is who might step into this void, because I'm souring on the Sixers now, just because what I'm watching is a team in chaos, frankly, a team that can't seem to get out of their own way time after time. And at some point, it's fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I have to kind of get out of that. But it makes me wonder who the team is, because the Pacers just aren't ready. They're not ready without their full complement of guys. And it makes you wonder who can step up. I don't know if Miami has the top-level talent. And then that leads me to Toronto and to the Celtics. And Jason, do one of those teams jump out at you as a team that you could see kind of making a push to make it to the finals out of the East over the Bucks?
I'd say the Raptors. Look, as much respect as we're giving the Celtics, you have the issue with Kemba Walker's health, right? Brad Stevens has him on a bit of a minutes restriction. They played that close game against Miami. Jimmy Butler didn't play. A little scary. The Heat, I think, will be a force to be reckoned with, but are they all the way to get through the East? No. The Sixers, not winning the East. And as great as the Pacers look, the clock will strike midnight on them. So I think it's a two-team race. I think if it's not Milwaukee, it's going to be Toronto. Nick Nurse, the job he's doing with that team is unparalleled. I wanted to mention later on in the show that there are co-NBA coaches of the year, Coach Bud, Bucks, best record in the league, Billy Donovan, Oklahoma City Thunder, taking what was supposed to be a hapless group and turning them into a solid playoff contender. And I read a tweet today from Woj, who's back, by the way, so Ben, our free Woj worked. Nick Nurse was one vote away from a three-way tie because all 30 coaches vote. There was almost a three-way tie for Coach of the Year. And we know that Raptors coaches winning Coach of the Year usually means a death sentence. Sorry, Dwayne Casey. But Nick Nurse is a hell of a coach. And it's nothing against Budenholzer, but Nick Nurse, they lost Kawhi Leonard. They lost Danny Green. You know what? Next man up. They came ready to play. Kyle Lowry renaissance season, baby. So I think if it's not the Bucks, it's going to be Toronto.
I'm curious. I'm a little worried about their half-court offense. I'm gonna stick with my Sixers, but I'm really losing confidence quickly, and I'm leaning Celtics if I go off the Sixers, who could be their first-round opponent no less. But speaking of first-round opponents,
before we get into this,
yep.
Can we just give Luka Doncic his due? I was going to lay this up for you because it makes sense. The Mavericks actually clinched a playoff berth after a loss, so not much to celebrate. But, Ben, you've been a Luka guy since day one. I got to give you the props. You zoned in on him before the draft. I remember vividly that night of the draft, you and I did a show, and I wasn't really too high on him. I picked Trae Young to win Rookie of the Year. Luka Doncic shut me up, and he's one of the best young players in the league. So I'll let you read the stat line, and before we get into the West 8th seed, just to keep it chronological, just wax poetic.
I mean, before I do that, let's just say, like, this stat line isn't – the crazy part is the stat line hasn't been out of the ordinary since he's been in the bubble. But tonight, he put up 34 points, 20 rebounds, and 12 assists to go along with 2 blocks. But if you look deeper into the stats, Jason, I mean, the thing that's amazing has been that he's been doing this game after game. So he put up 40, 11, and 8 on Sunday. And against the Rockets, he put up a mere 28, 10, and 13. I mean, he's just been doing this night after night. You're absolutely right. He is a superstar already, one of the top 10 players in the league. He's ready to go. But Jason, we're going to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. And before we do that, we have a couple things we have to do. The first is, I mean, anyone who's watching the NBA, anyone who follows it knows the race for the 8th seed in the West and who gets to play the Lakers is tightening. I mean, really, really tightening. And if you're in Memphis, really hold on to your seats here because it's going to get pretty wild. But we now have, Jason, do you want to say for the folks, you spit this out at me, the difference between the 8 and the 13, and I just, it's mind-boggling to me.
I mean, honestly, right now, had the bubble started, the Minnesota Timberwolves would have been mathematically eligible because 8-seeded games, they were 8 seeds back. They should have invited them too. They should have invited Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell to the bubble. But as it stands, and this is going to change by the time this podcast is released, but you have the Grizzlies at 32 and 36 in the 8th seed, right? Dallas locked up the 7. They could get as high as 6. Portland, who we've been high on, 2 games back. The Spurs, also 2 games back. The Pelicans, who lost their first 2 in the bubble, getting Zion back into form, 2.5 back. The Suns, winners of 3 straight, 3 games back. And finally, the Kings, 3.5 back. They'll likely be the first team eliminated. So let's, for the sake of argument, include the Suns. 5 teams for 2 spots in a play-in series that no one's looking forward to if you're in the bubble. If you're a fan, it's fantastic, but no one is looking forward to it if you're in that bubble. I mean, the Grizzlies do not look strong. As great as Ja Morant has been, still going to win Rookie of the Year. The loss of Triple J has to hurt. They lost Justice Winslow before the game started. I mean, it is almost a foregone conclusion that we will not see the Grizzlies in a best of 7. The question is, which out of the Trailblazers, Spurs, Pelicans, and I guess Suns will be primed to jump into that 8th seed and face the Lakers in round 1?
I mean, I think you can knock the Kings off, as you said. I think these other teams, it's really interesting. I mean, the Suns have been amazing. I've really liked what they've done, but I just don't think they can keep it up. And it's the same with the Spurs. They're just too shorthanded. I think what's going to be really interesting is I would not want to handicap out of the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, and the Blazers who ends up in the last kind of 2 spots, if you will, for the play-in. Because the Pelicans, can I just read you the Pelican schedule, Jason? This is, I mean, as far as a schedule that includes all teams that could theoretically make the playoffs, you know, you have to take that into account. But they play the Kings, the Wizards, the Spurs, the Kings, and then the Magic, who are almost certainly going to have nothing to play for in the last game. So that's probably going to be against backups. So they've the Kings twice, the Wizards once, the Spurs, and probably the Orlando Magic backups. That's their 5 games. I mean, you just, given the teams here, you could not ask for a better schedule. And meanwhile, the Blazers and the Grizzlies, their schedules are brutal. The Blazers are playing the Rockets right now, so we won't know the results of that. After that, they play Denver, Clippers, Sixers, Mavericks, and Brooklyn. That's going to be interesting. As I mentioned to you before the show, we just don't know what those guys are going to be playing for. Meanwhile, the Grizzlies play the Jazz and the Thunder and the Raptors, who the Raptors might not have anything to play for even by this weekend. And then they get the Celtics and the Bucks. The Celtics just lost, which theoretically keeps the Heat alive to try and move up into the 3rd seed. Milwaukee's going to have nothing to play for. But at the same time, you know, even the Milwaukee backups are pretty solid. So, I mean, the schedules are going to play a big role here, Jason. I think we're going to see the Pelicans in there. It's almost too close to call between the Grizzlies and the Blazers for me. I mean, I'm leaning Portland right now, honestly. See Portland and New Orleans, but that 2-game lead is big, so I'm just not sure. I mean, are you leaning one way? Which 2 teams do you think are going to make it?
I mean, I think the matchup we all want to see is Pelicans-Portland, right? Especially without Jaren Jackson Jr. and Justice Winslow. The Grizzlies don't have too much of an allure right now as good of a young player as Ja Morant is. But, man, Damian Lillard versus Zion Williamson for the right to play LeBron James sounds pretty good to me. As much respect as I want to give Pop and the Spurs, they are not fit for this current playoff structure. They don't have LaMarcus Aldridge. DeMar DeRozan